faced with a test, even if it's a driving test, I make myself half crazy.
My wife is kind of the same way, and it's funny because she's the one who I do all my judging and practice and training with, and she's super knowledgeable. And it's just like I always try to get her, just take the exam, and she doesn't want any part of it. You know?
It's taken me. Let me see. I've been making mead for almost 25 years. Running got mead for almost that long. And just the thought of that test makes me shrivel up inside. I'm just like, test?
You'd be fine at it.
Oh, I'm sure I would, but it's a test. Okay, doesn't matter how much I might know. It's still a test. So yeah, I just got this. This thing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's just a personality flaw on my part,
Yeah, I think it is a good thing though for especially most of the judging exam. I mean, the online portion is really just kind of to sift out people who. What was happening is there were people who were taking the exam and they were clearly not prepped, and it was just wasting a lot of the resources, the organization, and so they created this additional prerequisite, and it does a really good job. I think the passing rate is like 98% or something at this point. It's
nice.
It's really high, and yeah, but it's the tasting portion that I think is really important, and even if even if people don't want to become mead certified, I get it, sit down with a score sheet. You go to BJCP.org, sit down with a score sheet, and try some meads and fill out a BJCP score sheet.
Yeah.
It's it's this idea of sitting down and concentrating. I was looking up. I interviewed a scientist by the name of Avery Gilbert for an article that I wrote, and he's he calls himself a smell scientist. He's a really super interesting guy. He wrote this book called What the Nose Knows. And, basically what he was saying is that, he wrote this book and was kind of focusing on perfumers, and the art of perfuming, but it could also be applied to, to mead judging and meads and beers and wine and whatever else. And that it's not that these people have more complex, taste receptors. It's that they concentrate, and that they concentrate, and through training are able to kind of hone their ability to concentrate on individual aspects and pick them out. There was another book that I read called Neurogastronomy, where the author kind of talks about the fact that our brains are not kind of wired to taste something and to be able to verbalize it. Our brains are kind of wired to taste something, and is it poisonous? Is it not? Is it bitter? Is it bad? Is it rotten? So creating those metabolic pathways, creating those neurological pathways, takes training, and I think that's something that taking the exam does, and I think that, like we talked about, mead making is to me, mead making is very art based. It's very palate based, and I love that aspect of it. And training for the exam, I think, enhances that ability, which in turn makes you a better mead maker, makes you a better mead consumer, makes you a better mead appreciator,
Yeah, I agree. And, I mean, that's one of the things that I think this is going to tie in rather nicely. Bobby was going to talk about flavor profiles and, how he comes up with the flavors that he does and stuff like that. But I think that's a big thing for a lot of people is they're not really looking at it from that perspective necessarily. They're not. I look at it like the way I cook. I cook that way too. I go, oh, this needs a little curry and maybe a little garam masala and some more pepper and I'm tasting as I go. Trying to figure it out.
But it's evolving for you.
It is, yeah. It's evolving, and I'm trying to. I've got a picture. I've got a flavor picture in my head that I'm going for.
Right, but you're able to make that jump from A to B.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people really don't have that imagination to do. Some people can open a book and look at a recipe and just say, okay, I need X, Y, and Z. I need 2 eggs, flour, sugar, vanilla, and, cinnamon. And other people can reach in and go, well, what's in my cabinet? What can I make?
Yeah.
And, I consider myself a guy who opens the kitchen cabinet and looks what I can make.
Yeah.
I have vanilla, I have cloves, I have cinnamon, I have nutmeg, I have mace. What do I want to make?
Yeah. I do the same thing. I mean, I was going through and straightening out my tea collection, and I'm sitting there looking at them, and I'm sticking my nose in every container because I'm trying to remember what that smelled like and why I bought it, because I bought it for a reason, you know. And I'm a tea hoarder, so I've got way more tea than I could possibly drink. If the zombie apocalypse comes, I'll have tea, quite a lot of it, you know. But you know, in the meantime, though, I got to thinking, you know, I've added teas to meads before, and I got to thinking a lot of these are dried fruits, and not all of them actually have tea. You know, they're like those tea. They're you know, herbal drinks. They aren't necessarily tea, but you make a tea out of the ingredients, and so there's like dried apples, or there's anise, or there's flowers, or you know, there's all kinds of interesting stuff in these things, and you know, it's just fascinating to say, oh wow, I wonder if I paired this with mesquite honey, and you know.
No, that's really what it comes down to with the flavor pairings.
Yeah, it really is.
You know, and when you go look at, like, ethnic food, you know, I go to a Middle Eastern shop, and they have, you know, the baklava with the walnuts and honey and the mint and the figs. And you taste it, it's great. But why aren't we making that jump to meat?
Well, a lot of people are.
Well, a lot of people are, and a lot of people aren't. A lot of people still, you know, I'm going to buy a can of cherry puree, and I'm going to put 1 can of cherry puree in, and, you know, I'm going to put in the vanilla bean, and then you get a guy like Carvin who's mixing 3 different honeys, throwing oak in the primary, you know, using dried cherries, steeping dried cherries in, then using fresh cherries, and then, you know, putting dried cherries on the back. So he's having, you know, he gets that complexity of the different mix of honeys, of the oak, of the different types of cherries, the fresh cherries, the dried cherries, the cherries going in the primary, the cherries in the secondary, and then, you know, putting it on cherries in the tertiary. He's definitely getting more complexity than somebody else who's just adding that 1 can of cherry puree in the primary and walking away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I can't help but fiddle. I'll make the cherry mead and go, oh, but I always loved my grandma's cherry pies. They had cinnamon and vanilla in them. So I add a little cinnamon and vanilla and see what I get with that. Yeah, but I kind of wanted that crust-like note, and that's where the handful of malab that I threw into one of my cherry mells came in with. Was I had it in the cupboard, and I'm digging through the cupboard going, what can I do? And I thought, oh, I have this malab, and it's cherry pits. I wonder what that'll do, you know. And I threw that in there, and I mean, it was way better than I thought it was ever going to be, you know. But it was just really cool because, you know, I was doing like you were saying. I was just messing about in my cupboard, you know.
But I think,
I think some of it has to do.
What was that, Andrew?
I was going to say that, you know, some of it has to do with, I think, where the profession is, where the hobby is, where the community is. You know, it's, you know, as there's a reason why, you know, beer has become so experimental and so, you know, cutting edge, is because there's more breweries communicating with each other and more people who've gone into the hobby. You know, so a lot of things that, you know, you were saying that Carvin does, or even when I see his meads, or other people too, I wouldn't even think about, you know. So, you know, one of the reasons why it's so important to have, you know, things like Got Mead and you know, the American Mead Makers Association, and, you know, really kind of getting that, you know, that information out and allowing people to kind of collaborate and to communicate and stuff like that. You know, it helps out everybody on the whole.
Yeah, it does. And I think as you were talking about the articles you were writing in that, I think the more we spread this information around, the easier it's going to be. Because I see a lot of questions on the various mead groups that really kind of lead back to, I don't have that spread of basic information, and I'm not really thinking with my nose and my palate, as opposed to, you know, like Bobby was saying, throw a can of cherry puree into it and let it go. You know, don't be afraid to play and see what you get. Sometimes it's not going to work. I've had a few turn out where it's like, never mind.
Let's not do that again.
Again. Yeah, it's a good note. That one didn't work, you know. But I've had some that were outstanding, and a couple of accidents that were like amazing that I can't repeat because they were accidents. And, you know, but it opens up possibilities even when you can't repeat it. I mean, I had an orange blossom traditional that died sweet. The yeast pooped out. I couldn't get it to restart. It was driving me crazy. And I had a strawberry melomel that we had a temperature spike. The air wasn't on yet, so the house went from like 40 to 75 in a single day. And so the fermentation went through the roof and burned it totally dry. And it had all kinds of fusels and hot notes. And so I was like, well, crap. All my strawberries are in here. I really don't want to throw this out. So I blended it with the orange blossom that was too sweet, and I ended up with this amazing mead. I was amazed at how good it was, because I figured it'd be like, okay, just not crappy, but it was really good.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's a lot of really good references in books out there, as well. The Flavor Bible, I know a lot of people throw that around, and that's cooking and culinary, but it's really just an amazing book talking about different flavors and stuff like that. I recently collaborated on a beer with Stan Hieronymus and a local brewery, Mustache Brewing Company. And, Stan just wrote a book called Brewing Local. And, he talks about how, beer is using local ingredients and even foraging for local ingredients, expressing the terroir of that area, expressing the character and culture of that area. So like a book like that and being able to do that in mead as well, it's a really kind of cool thing.
That is a really kind of cool thing. I got these books marked. I didn't have them yet, but they will be in my possession soon.
But I think people should really go around and look at what's in their area. Like, for me, it's easy in New York City. I can say, I can go anywhere and find anything. But you'll see that a lot of the flavors are already put together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Somehow
I think that a etouffee or something like that, though, wouldn't really make a good mead. But some of the spices in it might. Yeah.
Well, that's what you got to look at. What the spices are together.
Yeah.
A black cherry and cumin.
Mm-hmm.
I made a black cherry cumin mead. Came out wonderful.
Yeah, that would be really good.
We recently had Sergio from Melavino. Bob helped get Sergio from Melavino as a guest speaker for my club on Long Island, and he had, everything he had was phenomenal. But he had this one mead. I think it was blackberries and black pepper, and it was I would have never even thought about it, just like those two things. And I was like, this tastes like one of the best wines I've ever had. Like the peppers coming off of spicy phenols. And like the blackberries almost coming off as wine grapes. This is like a fantastic Syrah. It was awesome. It was mind blowing to me. And I've been on ever since then. I've been putting more black pepper into everything that I've been eating. It's just a different taste.
I started out doing. I had a recipe, Henry VIII era recipe from one of my reenacting cookbooks that was for a spiced wine. And you would make it, the recipe in the cookbook, you would make it with just a regular grape wine, but it had not black pepper. It had oh shoot, I hate it when I draw a blank on the word. It's a gingery, peppery spice that's from the Middle East, and I'm totally drawing a blank. But anyway, the pepper note was what got me. And it had ginger and cinnamon and nutmeg, and then this pepper note. And so I've been playing. I love pepper with fruit. I think pepper with fruit is amazing because it totally it totally makes the fruit taste jump out.
Sure.
I really think that it enhances it quite a bit, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, all these things, like you said, kind of create complexity and create, interesting, just interesting flavor profiles, it's one of the, like you said, it's like the Wild West of fermentables.
It is.
Fermented beverages, and that, every time you're adding different things in, you're increasing the number of flavor compounds, and you're increasing, the presence of the beverage, sometimes hopefully in a good way,
Somebody's asking, any ideas for Chipotle? And it's like, oh my God, lots. All kinds of things.
Yeah, well, I think.
Wow, that's an easy one.
One of the best. I've only given one. And when you judge a competition, you judge from like 0 to 50, and 50 is very rare, and you don't usually give anything below like a 13 or a 20. But the 150 I gave was for a Chipotle Mead. It was so good. You know, like it was orange blossom honey, like a sweet orange. I still remember it. It was a couple of years ago, but a sweet orange blossom honey mead with Chipotle, and like the smokiness and like the just enough heat with like the sweetness and the honey character. It was so good.